Welcome to Perspectives Online and On Air from WFSU Public Media. I'm Tom Flanigan. This program using Zoom, pre-recorded on Tuesday, January 5th for playback on Thursday, January 7th, the show appearing on both WFSU FM and our WFSU Public Media Facebook page. Well, welcome to the first perspectives of a brand new year, which we hope with all sincerity is a vast improvement over the year that preceded it here. And we hope that you and yours had a restful, relaxing, and a safe holiday as well. You know, this is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, the month of January. And in past years, particularly in our area, that observance sometimes seemed, I don't know, a little bit academic maybe. We had trouble, I think, really bringing home the severity and the pervasiveness of the problem because there wasn't that much to really identify with locally. Well, that kind of came to a halt this past November. Tallahassee police and other law enforcement agencies dropped a real bombshell by announcing the results of a 2-year-long probe called Operation Stolen Innocence. And that involved, if you didn't hear, a girl who was just 13 when she became the victim of horrendous abuse at the hands of multiple adults, dozens and dozens of people allegedly, including some well-known and previously pretty well-respected people in our community. And ultimately, more than 170 people were arrested and charged in the case. Now, we're going to talk about that and the many other ways that human trafficking hits close to home over the course of the hour. And we have a terrific panel to bring us up to date on just what is going on and why it impacts all of us. Okay, so let's go around and meet the panel. We welcome back an old and dear friend in the persona of Robin Hassler Thompson, Executive Director of the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. A busy lady for sure. Robin, it is good to see you again.
So wonderful to be back, Tom. And thank you again for helping us kick off this month. I don't know how many years, it's been several years now, but it's really great to be back.
Well, it's a regular part of our emphasis or outreach, I think, Robin, just because, again, it is a problem that continues and does not go away. And we just have to keep reminding ourselves that this is something, again, that impacts virtually everybody. So thanks on that score here. Well, we just talked about some law enforcement components and the judicial system and all that. So an attorney with Holland Knight and a major factor in the prosecution of human trafficking in Florida is Barbara Martinez, and she joins us here today as well. Barbara, it is good to see you, and thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And like Robin mentioned, it is great that you're really highlighting this very important issue.
Well, it is our pleasure for sure, Barbara, and can't wait to delve into this issue in more depth with you here. And again, bringing it all home, why not bring in the chair of the Leon County Board of County Commissioners, Rick Miner. And Commissioner, good to see you. Happy New Year. And I love the background that you have there. You're in the office today, aren't you?
I am. Yes, we've got a scaled down operation here at the county, but definitely here in the office today. I wanted to say Happy New Year to you too, Tom and Robin and Ms. Martinez and everybody that's listening. It's great to be here and really good to be here about a very important issue that we're talking about today.
Well, we'll go ahead and get into our definition of terms. Then again, Robin Hassler Thompson, for the benefit of folks who maybe don't understand the extent of that problem in Florida and here in North Florida. Where do we stand here in, I guess, comparison to the rest of the nation when it comes to human trafficking in North Florida, where we are, and the state of Florida as a whole?
Yeah, Florida has the dubious and unfortunate distinction still of being third in the nation when it comes to the number of human trafficking cases that are called into our national human trafficking hotline. So we know that we are ground zero at so many levels for both sex and labor trafficking. What we've seen around the state is that sex trafficking cases and labor trafficking cases have Particularly, we've been seeing increases of labor trafficking cases in our state. If you go to that hotline that has the National Human Trafficking information on it, you will see that agriculture, housekeeping, hotel, all those industries are places where we're seeing also increases. And then in our area as well, you mentioned Operation Stolen Innocence. So that is one way that this issue does come to the fore, is through arrests and prosecution. So we know it's happening, but like always, Tom, this is a very hidden phenomenon. It is happening right under our noses, whether it's in hotels or in the fields or in other places. You know, we've seen how we're so much more isolated because of COVID. And one of the things locally that DCF has told us is that the number of cases of reported child abuse has gone down. It's starting to go up now, but we've had a lot of these cases, we fear, of human trafficking not come to the attention of authorities because of this intersection with COVID-19.
Barbara Martinez, that puts it kind of in your bailiwick right away when we talk about how seriously law enforcement organizations take this crime, because it can be very hard to detect, and I presume difficult to prosecute, because it's like you go into a long abandoned structure and you open the door and everything in there scatters. It kind of is the same way with human trafficking, isn't it? It makes it tough for law enforcement and prosecutors too, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was a prosecutor for 23 years and spent a lot of, I would say probably 15 years doing child exploitation and human trafficking at the federal level. And I will say that, and I used to do white collar cases. And so I would always tell people trafficking is the most complex crime I've ever prosecuted or worked to investigate, because it does have, it is hidden, like we're discussing, and it does create the situation where when law enforcement goes in, you're right, a lot of victims often are uncooperative for many reasons. They're intimidated, they are worried about deportation, depending on the circumstances, whatever it may be. There are a lot of things that really bode against a successful investigation and prosecution, which is why it's so important to have this community outreach and to have partners, right? To have people who are eyes and ears for law enforcement, right? People who are in their day-to-day lives, seeing things that law enforcement simply cannot see or cannot detect on their own. I will tell you from experience that the community participation and hotline calls were being referred to the federal government and law enforcement, as well as to state and locals, and that was a key component, not only for prosecution, but also for obtaining evidence, intelligence, tying different locations, patterns of activity that was occurring not only in different parts of Florida, but also potentially in other states.
Okay. Rick Miner, back here to this Operation Stolen Innocence again, because it struck me as being a wake-up call for those of us who perhaps still harbor this supposition, which is, I know it's illogical, but still you think of this as, you know, shady people in back alleys, and suddenly this comes down. You have 170 plus prosecutions pending on this thing, and some of the names that came out here as suspects in this were just jaw-dropping. I mean, you're talking some, you know, pretty high-placed folks in the community who supposedly were involved in this. Did that strike you too?
It did. You know, I want to thank Robin because as they have both said, I mean, this is in many cases right under our noses. And one thing that the Tallahassee Leon Commission on the Status of Women and Girls has been doing for years is trying to help also to educate folks and increase awareness of some of the behaviors, the hints that you can see in people in people's actions that can maybe if people are aware of the signs and some of the hints that they might get in other people's behavior, they can be the ones that can notify law enforcement and save lives and protect innocent victims from being taken advantage of. And one thing that Ms. Martinez has hit on is focusing on certain areas. You know, we know that there are areas within Leon County that have a concentration of this type of activity. You know, in addition to Operation Stolen Innocence, we also had in 2019 a TPD investigation for about a week that was focused on the hotels along the North Monroe I-10 interchange. And within that 1 week, there were 19 arrests for various criminal behavior, you know, illegal drug possession, possession of weapons by felons. All of this is very highly interconnected. So when you see a hotspot for crime, such as we have in North Monroe and I-10, that also tends to be a hotspot for human trafficking. Robin and I have talked about this. We have a majority of human trafficking arrests in Leon County take place right in that area of hotels along North Monroe and I-10. So we can focus on an area, but then apply that community outreach in ways to help address the issue. And we'll talk about this during the next parts of the program, but you know, Robin and I would like to work together toward increasing awareness among the people that work in the hotels as well as the surrounding restaurants to tackle the problem.
Well, let's go around the panel and get some of those early warning signals. In this COVID era, when we're trying to socially distance and maintain some separation between us and other people, we may not be as observant as we might otherwise be when it comes to people in our surroundings. I mean, my gosh, we're trying to stay away from them. But Robin Hassler Thompson, what are some things we can be on the lookout for? And it's not necessarily as blatant as a young girl screaming, "Help, help, they're taking me away." What are we looking for here to give us at least a reason to suspect and perhaps notify authorities that something is amiss here?
Well, you know, there are so many things. A lot of this really does depend on looking around to a vulnerability that might be demonstrated by someone. So if someone is in an extremely vulnerable situation, just taking the big picture. Like, for example, before COVID, we were at the Kearney Center looking and working with our local unhoused population. So that, you know, the shelter was there. We knew people were most vulnerable. So what we did simply was go there and talk to people, to residents and staff, and we're doing that remotely now, but talking to people who are vulnerable. Now that might sound like, well, that's not an immediate sign of trafficking, but I'll tell you, it is the #1 sign of anybody who's victimized is that they do have this vulnerability. So even in the case of the Operation Stolen Innocence, that young child, she was homeless. She had so many crises in her life that she was easy prey for traffickers. So we take a very wide angle lens vision, if you will, at how do you see if someone is trafficked. And with that kind of the idea of vulnerability, I would actually like to pass it to Barbara, because she undoubtedly has some examples, some case examples that will bring the issue really, really home. Like, how did they come to your attention, Barbara?
Sure. So, you know, very important, and I think you've hit on this, Tom, you know, it's not like a robbery where you see it when it's happening. You know, so a lot of the tips or the information that would come in, oftentimes people are worried is not enough, right? So you're not going to call 911, you're not going to call a local police department, but it's that feeling that you get that something just doesn't seem right. And the great thing about the hotline, and which is that 1-888-373-788, I still remember, it's ingrained in my head, is that, you know, it doesn't have to be a fully exposed or definite, you know, human trafficking situation. So some of the examples that we would get are for lots of people living in one home. You know, for example, we had a labor trafficking case in West Palm Beach, Florida, where, believe it or not, there were 38 Filipino workers living in a home that looked like one of those cookie cutter developments. And frankly, that went on for about a year before anybody reported it, because The neighbors were, the traffickers were Filipino, and they had people coming in and out, and they owned their own business. But it was obviously not a normal situation. Another one involving women and minors. Oftentimes it's unclear whether somebody's a minor, but they look like young girls. Certainly, where they're staying in one apartment. And we've received tips about a lot of foreign women, Eastern European women, or even American women, but US citizens. But it seems odd that they're coming in and out at all hours of the night. And we're able to get that information, follow up, learn more, tie it maybe to other people, other locations, which is great. We've even, just had situations where one single worker, and one employee seemed to be very hidden from the outside world, other than maybe going to church. And so people at the church would try to engage in conversation, and they felt like maybe that person was not allowed. They had that feeling that something was wrong, and they would report that. And sure enough, you may have a domestic servitude type of situation. So I really implore people to think about those times when you see something that doesn't seem right, and to say that it's okay to call that in, and because if there are multiple complaints involving the same location, the same people, the same hotel, then we start to see a pattern, and a pattern is something that we can definitely help work on much more. I think reactively.
I want to get the same. I'll get to you in a second here, Robin. Commissioner Minor, I know you have had some emphasis on, if not cracking down, at least perhaps being a little bit more circumspect about some of the businesses along that North Monroe Street corridor that you referenced a little earlier in our conversation. There are some of these activities going on under the auspices of what would otherwise be legitimate businesses. I mean, you can't pick up a prescription at most CVS's at 3 o'clock in the morning, but in some parts of Leon County, you can have a massage. That just seems odd to me. I don't know.
Yes, and there was an arrest just recently about a man from Pensacola that was arrested for human trafficking in connection with some massage parlors, one of which was on North Monroe here in Tallahassee, but also massage parlors in Virginia and Pennsylvania. So, I mean, it's an issue. Yeah, my focus in large part recently has been along North Monroe, as you mentioned. And, I've actually canvassed North Monroe. I've walked up and down North Monroe, just walking into business storefronts, talking with the manager or the owner, and basically putting together an email list and getting together this network of businesses along North Monroe. And one thing that I'd like to do, working with Robin and Barbara and others, is reaching out to these businesses and offering that type of awareness training that staff offers with Robin, and by educating not just the hotel staff, but also broadening that. This is one thing that Robin has talked about in terms of her strategy, is broadening that to the restaurants that are nearby the hotels, so that you have restaurant staff, waiters, cashiers. If someone comes up to a cashier and orders something, that is a great opportunity for that employee to take a look and try to get some of those signs that Robin and Barbara were talking about. We have an interest in making sure that everyone who works and lives in that area is aware of these signs to watch out for. We've also seen increased homelessness along North Monroe. We need to find, not only is it just the right thing to do, is to help these people find permanent homes, but it also is that population is very vulnerable to human trafficking, as Barbara and Robin have said. If you're homeless, you don't have the resources, and you need to rely on people. And in some cases, you might rely on the wrong person that has taken advantage of you and putting you in a situation where you are being trafficked without you even being aware of it. So we have an interest as a community in taking a look at North Monroe, reducing the crime there, helping the people that are homeless and around that area to find permanent housing, and then part of that requires us doing more community outreach with the people who live and work along that area so that they can spot the signs.
Okay, thank you. Robin, go ahead. I'm sorry we interrupted.
Yeah, I was wanting to share with you all that, and really it ties into both what Rick and Barbara just said, is that STAC received funding from Leon County. It's the Leon County CARES funding to do outreach on these very points into our community. So we have a series of billboards, direct social media, toolkits for our community partners with graphics that show or ask you, are you being forced to work or use your body? You might think it odd that nowhere on that billboard are you going to see the words human trafficking. And that's because people don't identify that they are being trafficked, just what we were talking about. But they will say, yeah, I've been working, no one's paid me. I'm afraid to leave my job. I don't have my boss holds my identity documents, or they're going to kill my sister if I do something and I have to keep having sex with these men every Thursday or every Friday night. So we're doing this again with this idea of public-private partnership for us as a nonprofit. So grateful that Leon County is doing this, and we're tying this into to people being vulnerable to COVID, because again, because of biases and discrimination and economic instability and insecurity that's endemic in our world, that makes people more vulnerable around COVID. It's making people more vulnerable to being trafficked. So just wanted to let everyone know that this is happening in this awareness month, that we're releasing this information. And Tom, I can send you the toolkit and information if you want any of this on the website, but really echoes everything that Barbara and Rick were just talking about.
That is terrific, Robin. And also you've got some event-oriented sorts of things coming up too, right?
As usual, we have a community calendar that's on the STAC website. We have 10 different events, including this, that will help people become more aware of what human trafficking is and what they can do. It's one thing to be aware, but we want people to have the confidence to take action. You're never going to know, I shouldn't say never, but you may not know 100% that someone is being trafficked. But how do you, when you suspect something, how do you take action safely and help that person to support them in what they need? And most often it is around safety issues.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Well, and I was just going to follow up and say, it's so important and great to hear everything that is happening locally to get people together and educated. And I think it's also just important to highlight that although most people want to do something because it's the right thing and to help people out, one of the things that I'm now doing in my role in private practice is compliance programs for companies and businesses. And there is this aspect that I think is important for business owners to know, and that is that there is civil liability if you are not aware, if you are not being training or being trained. And this is an issue that is very much happening. It's not like 10 years ago when people would say, oh, what is trafficking? Nobody had any idea. Today, and we've seen this with very high profile cases that have been publicized nationally and internationally, people are less forgiving. Customers are less forgiving. There have been suits filed against major chain hotel companies by individuals who claim that they were trafficked in hotels. There are businesses that have been sued civilly where individuals say they were labor trafficked and products that they produced or that have been provided to US citizens have been made that way. And so there is this aspect also that it's smart business, and that it's important to be in compliance and to think about that. And that's another way to prevent it, right? Because rather than just responding, because by the time we're able to rescue somebody, that person has been terribly exploited. So anything we can do to prevent it, I think is equally important.
Before we move on, Barbara, something you just mentioned that resonates definitely with me because of a recent conversation I had with Paulo Anino, a professor at the FSU Law School, and his graduate group that is working on some international human trafficking. This is something that we don't see with the personal degree of the other kinds of trafficking that we've been discussing, but products that are made with essentially forced labor, often involving children in other countries that we as consumers then purchase, thereby aiding and abetting this kind of thing. You're going to be addressing that too, aren't you?
Yes, yes. I mean, I know Robin also has a huge interest in that as well. So first, obviously, with having corporate clients that understand the ramifications, it's interesting. So many people and so many corporations are interested in doing anything they can to abide by regulations and laws. There are regulations about chain of supply, actually, in the United States. There are, obviously, California is a big enforcer, but even just more broadly federally. I think we may see some increases in that, by the way. And I think that encouraging corporations to understand that once something like this comes to light, whether they were aware or unaware, it's a huge compliance risk. And so we're trying to help companies to make sure that they understand what it is, how they can minimize the risk, like you would doing their due diligence, like they would do in any other type of compliance area. And you save lives and you help people. So, I mean, I think that that's a great corporate idea and certainly even for local businesses as well.
And that's really been the theme of our Imagining Freedom event every year, Tom. It's really highlighting those businesses, restaurants, farmers in our community who produce goods and services that we know are slavery and trafficking free. And we give them applause and kudos and suggest people buy from, Red Eye Coffee, because we know that their supply chains are free of human trafficking. So that is so important.
That's another reason to shop local, I think, Rick Miner. But yeah, now I got to ask you, does Leon County vet all of the supplies, of which there are a lot that the local government purchases, to make sure that they are not involved with any of these kinds of activities?
That's a good question. I don't know how much we vet the contractors that we work with, but Robert and I have talked about putting some things into our upcoming contracts where we would basically put that in a codified in the contract arrangements that we have with future contractors. So, it's the kind of thing where by putting that into a contract for Leon County, not only when they review and sign that contract, but you're also increasing accountability for that contractor to make sure that any of its suppliers have a clear chain within their suppliers about making sure that none of that whole supply chain that they deal with has any type of human trafficking involved in it.
Okay.
I think that's great. Commissioner Miner. And let me just add something from a legal perspective, that unlike other types of crimes, and I'm talking about criminal, not just civil and regulations, but the standard of knowledge for trafficking in the sex arena specifically is knowledge or reckless disregard, essentially, right? If you knew or should have known, then you may be in violation of criminal laws. And so the looking the other way and deliberate ignorance is not a defense. So making people and helping people to understand that you have to be accountable, that doesn't work in this arena because of the way the law has developed, is very important and helpful to businesses, I think.
Yeah,
no, go ahead. I'm sorry, Tom. And the conversations that Robin, and I have had about that, I just recently, I think, are very helpful. And there are ways where we can, as Barbara just said, there are ways where we can ensure that people don't feel like they can turn a blind eye. And so working with us at the county and talking about putting that type of clause in the contract will, I think, change that type of thing to where people say, I'm on the hook. I'm signing this contract in black and white. I'm responsible now. I'm held accountable you know, it's not convenient for me. It's not, you know, it's to my detriment to turn a blind eye. I've got to be aware of this and maintain that awareness.
You know, and the other thing that I found is when you start talking to businesses, they do want to do the right thing. A lot of them don't understand what trafficking is. They don't understand, you know, how they have a role in it. And it's really a matter, just like we're doing with all these events this month with the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking, it's all about trying to make people aware so they are empowered to do the right thing, and they will step up. I believe people will step up. We're at a critical, we've kind of, I think, passed a critical mass, but more and more people are understanding what this is. And I think if we give them the tools and we give them knowledge and confidence so they can respond in the right way, I think most people will.
I agree. When I'm sorry, Tom. When I've been talking to North Monroe businesses and asking them about what their experiences are, I mean, every single one of them I've talked to have talked about the crime, and so I think they want to help improve the situation. One thing that's great about Tallahassee and Leon County is that the people who live here want to make this a better community, and they want to get involved and they want to help. So, you know, when it comes to increasing awareness, when it comes to making sure they do make that call when they see something suspicious, I think the businesses along North Monroe are more than ready to step up.
But are those resources available on an ongoing basis? For instance, the consumer who just goes into a store and gets a candy bar, do they have the wherewithal to look at the different brands and say, uh-oh, I think that some of these, according to a list I saw or some other resource, may be suspect. I will avoid them. I will instead purchase this one over here because I looked on the list and they say that it's you know, made with regular compensated labor and not by enslaved children in Guatemala. Robin, do you have those kinds of things available?
Yes, we do, actually. One of our sponsors, speaking of chocolate, but one of our sponsors for our event was Tony's Chocolonely, which is Chocolonely, which is a company out of Belgium. They gave us 175 bars of chocolate, which I could not hand out in person. It was so frustrating. So we ended up giving lots of chocolate gifts away. But the fact is we have on our website lots of information, surviveandthriveadvocacy.org. You could just Google slavery-free goods, trafficking-free goods. There's a website called Know Your slaveryfootprint.org. Where you can type that in and actually figure out how many people who are enslaved people are working for you, whether it's through the production of your cell phone or your car, or your clothing. There are lists and books and all kinds of things that are out there because, again, this issue is getting more and more attention. And it really is so important, your power as a consumer, to make those decisions with your dollars. You know, it might be a clothing company, like there's one called Stitch Fix, which is a clothing subscription company. They have on their website, we do not purchase, you know, clothes that are not produced, you know, safely or with people who are not enslaved. So there is more awareness about this, and you just have to do a little bit of research. It's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's getting better and better.
And Barbara Martinez, the way to attack this most effectively would seem to be, from what I've been hearing from Robin and Commissioner Minor, is good old-fashioned free market capitalism. You starve these activities for revenue, you will decrease them and ultimately put them out of business like any other branch of commerce.
Or even better, you get them to, you know, understand it and to improve their practices, and then it's competition right at its best. You know, getting off that list. And so it's interesting that you raised that, Tom, because it was a huge decision for me to leave being a career prosecutor at the United States Attorney's Office and to switch into private, and the former U.S. attorney is a partner at Holland Knight, and he was the one who recruited me and said, I think, there's some other things you can still do, not exclusively. I do other kinds of work, but he said, to help with the compliance part on the anti-trafficking, Holland Knight is very open to that. And I thought, wow, it is very limiting. And I used to say this as a prosecutor, to try to combat trafficking strictly through prosecution or arrests. Why? Because the crime has committed, people have been hurt already. It's difficult, like we discussed, for all the reasons that you said or highlighted. So if we can prevent it, if we can also share it with people who, are in a position to really make a huge difference internationally, I think that's a really great thing. And I will tell you, being in private practice, like Robin said, it's people, it's surprising how many people who are very good at their industry, well-educated, know a lot of things, are not well-versed on in trafficking. And so this is a great thing that you guys are doing, Commissioner Minor and the Radio Robin, everybody, to get all partners together. So yes, absolutely. I think the best approach is partnership and prevention first. And then, as part of that, we will unfortunately discover other trafficking that needs to be prosecuted.
There's still a law enforcement component there, and Commissioner Minor, that again falls under the wherewithal of you folks when it comes to the Sheriff's Department budget, and coming off of an all-time record homicide year. I just saw those numbers, and that's terrifying as well. But will Sheriff McNeil and his department, even as revenues are down, still have the resources that organization will need to keep up with, on top of everything else, possible human trafficking, if not outbreak, at least an ongoing problem in this community?
Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, we touched on this earlier, but with the pandemic, we're seeing increases in poverty, increases in homelessness, and also increases in isolation. And so all of those things together contribute to more vulnerability among many people, which is ripe for increased victimization of human trafficking. So the work that Robin is doing and what Barbara has been doing is even more important now than it was before the pandemic, because unfortunately, there's a greater population out there now that is vulnerable, susceptible to human trafficking and being victims. So to answer your question, Tom, yes, we need to make sure that our law enforcement, our sheriff's office, our Tallahassee Police Department have the resources they need in the midst of the pandemic to make sure that they're keeping people safe and also keeping an eye out for those vulnerable populations that are more susceptible to human trafficking.
Yeah, and that brings us back to that 13-year-old girl who was victimized that we talked about at the outset of the program. And Robin Hassler Thompson, is there any way that we can, and talking about vaccines and all, inoculate young people and families to give them more tools to prevent this from going on?
There are some quick short-term things to do, and then there are longer-term issues that Rick was just talking about. We do have several programs this month that focus on how you can work, how you can understand as parents and grandparents, how to help the youth that are around you, your kids, your grandkids, not to be vulnerable online. Right now we see kids going to school online. Everybody's got their phones, they're gaming, they're doing all kinds of things. They're accepting friends. I don't even know all the websites and all the apps that are out there, right, that kids are using. People need to know that their kids are more vulnerable online than they are walking through a parking lot and having a white van snatch them, right? That is not what we've seen in terms of children being vulnerable. So one of the things right away with kids is for every adult to understand and monitor their child's online behavior. And there are several events happening this month where you can be smarter about that, starting with the one on this, which will be yesterday when this airs at the Rotary Club, but also throughout the month. There are things about that. But the other thing is that how do you support people who are in need in our community? In this case, we don't know, but what was going on with that child's mother, parents, her living situation, her food security, what was going on? How did her teachers respond? Were her teachers educated? What have we been doing? And I'll tell you, our Florida Department of Education has been doing an amazing job of educating everybody, you know, school bus drivers and administrators across the board. Tom, the biggest thing we can do is really to help everyone to understand what this is and how to respond. That's what the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center is all about. We support survivors and we work really hard to connect and to educate and inform. So whatever it is, everybody's got a role. That's one of our other messages, to understand this and just know what to do. One of the things that we talked about with local government is how can we educate people who are doing home inspections or construction site, you know, things that the county does. They're boots on the ground inside businesses and houses and homes all the time. So how can they understand what's going on? So that's another piece of this. And then to talk to children themselves. I'm doing something with a sorority on Saturday online, talking to young girls in high school. How do you make sure that you are not vulnerable? You know, that person who is posing as a friend online could actually be a trafficker who's trying to lure you, who's trying to, you know, get pictures of you and blackmail you with those pictures and then force you into a situation that you'd find it very difficult to get out of. So talking to kids, talking to parents, everyone around that child is important. And then really branching out into the community at large. You know, I can talk forever about this, but I'll stop. I'll say one more thing. High schools have contacted STAC and said, how can we as students do something? So these consumer campaigns are really important as well. Kids are amazing. They want to learn. They want to get hands-on and involved. And it's so exciting to be part of, how can we make a difference? So we've got tons of projects we can talk about.
Yeah, I'm scared of the kids who have disappeared. We have here in Leon County, I think there are more than 1,000, maybe around 1,200 school agers who have essentially vanished, who have disappeared, who have dropped off of the grid, the educational grid, if you will. And I'm sure that we're not the only folks who are in that kind of circumstance, Barbara Martinez. Does that make even more kids potentially fodder for this sort of thing?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what, you know, Robin has highlighted that online, I used to do the Project Safe Childhood, which is basically online crimes in addition, separate and apart from trafficking that target children. And it's really at an all-time high. And with so many people at home now, pedophiles at home and traffickers who are really kind of they're forced to look for more online. So it absolutely is important, you know, to help prevent kids from literally disappearing. Kids think that if they talk to somebody online, that they know this person and that they know everything about them because, you know, and so it's a different mindset. And there's a lot of things that parents can do in that regard. I'll just highlight a couple of things about that I think are very important that sometimes we forget to mention. And one is that boys are absolutely victimized and targeted by traffickers and child extortionists, sextortionists, you know, they're exploited online. But also that a lot of parents focus on educating girls and not boys about tough things like, you know, listen, if they're online, they may be seeing things related to the sex industry and they feel like trafficking is totally distinct. And it is, there is a distinction between, you know, prostitution and sex trafficking. But I think parents, you know, kids learn from parents, obviously, teaching them how to treat a girl, what is appropriate, what's proper, what's not. And a lot of our traffickers were kids, boys, who started at a very young age, maybe learning that it was just different. If they didn't think a woman or a girl was worth anything, they could treat her very badly. And it's interesting how that plays out in trials, by the way. Traffickers, they go to trial. 90% of our cases went to trial. And it was because traffickers always believed that the women, or because it was mostly women or girls, would not be able to testify against them. So there's something to that. So I just want to highlight that.
Boy, talk about hubris. Good gosh. But it's also terrifying for anyone who's a parent. I am, Rick Miner, you are, and it's using resources like what Robin makes available and other information that is out there seems to me to be critical to educate across the board, parents, kids, governmental agencies, nonprofits, everybody here.
Absolutely. I would like to put that on our website as a banner, Tom, exactly what you said. That is exactly what it comes down to. And I'd also like to jump on what Barbara said on the issue of the vulnerability of girls and women, is that also the LGBTQ community so vulnerable. And because of the vulnerabilities that they have in our society, they're also more vulnerable to being trafficked, and they're more vulnerable to being othered or otherized by individuals, just like with our immigrant population. It's very, very disheartening to see how people can dehumanize another person, turn them essentially into a commodity and sell them, which is the essence of trafficking.
Well, Rick Miner, on top of all the other services and human assets that are supported by governments like Leon counties, it sounds like you got one more thing on your plate to really work with during what are still not certainly the best of times when it comes to revenues or resources or anything else. So how do you see this playing out moving forward for local governments to try to get behind this even more than perhaps they have in the past?
Well, here in Leon County, we're very fortunate to have the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center, led by Robin. She's been terrific for years on this, and she and I have just recently, reconnected on a series of conversations about what Leon County can do, what more we can do on top of what we've already been doing, and the Leon Cares funding that she's gotten for STAC has been put to really good use, increasing public awareness. But there's more that we can do, and Robin and I have talked about that clause in the contract for Leon County contractors. That's something that we want to push forward. And like I said before, I've talked about focusing on the geographical angle on this. So, North Monroe, the I-10 interchange, just north and just south of that. For folks that are interested in helping with that effort and keeping updated on what we're doing, working with the city of Tallahassee and with TPD and the sheriff's office, go to our website at Leon County and sign up for our email list, because we want to put together a big, large network of people, not just the hotels and restaurants and businesses along North Monroe who are getting on board, but also folks throughout the entire community that want to see real change, that want to see a reduction in the crime along that part of North Monroe, and also a reduction in the human trafficking along North Monroe. As we said at the beginning, that is a hotspot. That is the hotspot in Leon County with human trafficking. So we all have an interest in making sure that we do everything we can. If you want to join in this effort, go to our Leon County website, leoncountyfl.gov.
And we hope to be working on some training programs too that are going to be accessible for the business community. This month, one of the things that we're doing is we are doing a training for the hospitality industry. So people can go to our website and check that out. But we'd like to do a lot more training and awareness, really training and awareness that's tailored to those individual businesses and entities and to the faith community. There's lots going on that people can sort of be part of. And again, when they know more, then they're able to call law enforcement when they have a suspicion of something that doesn't look right. Just circling back to what Barbara was saying at the beginning, like something's not right about that. Something's not right about that woman who's working in this restaurant, or with that child in this classroom. So people's radars will be raised, and they'll be able to contact law enforcement, perhaps definitely try to get resources to the people who are being affected, and then do a lot more prevention. We'd love to see, and I'll tell you, we've gotten a number of calls from our healthcare community, where people from the emergency room or behavioral health have been calling us and saying, we have someone, we think she's been trafficked. And it turns out a number of these are also intimate partner violence situations. So it's only by way of saying every single nonprofit in this community, businesses, everybody working together is what's going to make a difference, because you could be working on one side of the coin and be as best you can be to help house kids that are runaways. But if you don't understand human trafficking, you're going to be missing a piece of it. So how do we all work together? And it's also by way of saying CCYS has been great to work with, and we've worked with them a lot. So it's really about joining hands on this issue.
It sounds like when it comes to this topic, all of us are first responders, essentially.
There you go again. That's great. Yes.
Yes. Can we use that? Can we use that?
For all first responders. I think we've got it. Got it.
Folks, we'll have to let it go at that. It has been a wonderful conversation, and during this Human Trafficking Awareness Month observance, what a great way to kick it off here for the first Perspectives program of the new year with Leon County Commission Chair Rick Miner. Rick, all the best to that wonderful family of yours, and to your aide, Jody. Thank you all for what you do down there on the 5th floor of the Leon County Courthouse. Barbara Martinez, you have had some terrific stuff to share today as far as how all of us can be more aware and observant when it comes to trying to ferret out this kind of horrible situation. And good luck on the presentations you're going to make during the month. And Robin Hassler Thompson could not do it without you there at the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. And
thank you, Tom. We love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
We will do it again probably before the year is out. And maybe we'll have some real success stories to share during that time too. So again, folks, thanks so much for being on Perspectives, which is produced by WFSU Public Media in Tallahassee. Thanks going out to Taylor Cox, Paul Dam, Amy Diaz de Villegas, Brandon Brown, Tricia Moynihan, and Lydell Rawls, our Director of Content, Kim Kelling, Executive Producer of the show, and I'm Tom Flanigan. Hey, in the weeks to come, we're going to be exploring multiple topics. Among these, a campaign to restore the historic street layout of Apalachicola, as well as the status of the community's namesake river, once again winding up in the courts. It'll be exciting. That and much more coming up in the course of the new year right here on Perspectives. Take care.